Okay, I'm going to fill out an LOI based on our template using a live listing. This particular listing is actually under contract, so this is what it would show if it's under LOI, but that doesn't matter for our purposes. I picked it because, well, it's in North Carolina and that's where I am. So here's our instruction page. So you will see a bunch of yellow and green. We use different color footnotes or different color highlights for things. And if you work with me as a client, you'll see me use similar highlights, which is why it's in here. Some people have asked about that, and yeah, that's why. So today's date. Seller name, we don't know the name of the seller because I'm doing this off of a public listing. I've not signed an NDA, I don't have a SIM. So it just becomes name, and we fill in address. Here. Right. And then we'll just, dear Miss Name. And just fill this in. Okay. And so we get to, and yes, the formatting looks weird here, right? It will look normal once it's finished, but there's really long footnotes is why that's the case. So a business like this, just kind of the nature of what it is, would be an asset purchase, I'll assume. But for purposes of the exercise, we'll just say that there's a massive contract with a huge company that's a customer, and we need to, that contract can't be assigned no matter what, but we could take it over. It doesn't have a change of control provision, but it could be assigned. So what we're going to do is just write this as if it's an equity purchase instead. Okay. So if we're doing an equity purchase, we come down here, right, and we've got a few changes to make. So let's copy and paste this. And this takes the place of this first paragraph. We want to be careful not to copy over the footnotes, because we still need the footnotes. Okay, so now we've done that first bit. Now we've got a couple other things to change, right? So let's just go ahead and do this now, right? So replace section 1. So section 1 is down here. And this is just copy paste stuff. Now we've got to replace 6.1. Sorry, 6.1c. So we'll go all the way down to 6.1c. Okay, we'll fix that. It's just 6c, so that will be fixed by the time this goes out. Go down to 6d down here. 6d, and if you notice, all we're doing is, in these changes, is changing purchased assets to purchased equity. We're just going through the exercise, and then we will, that's it. Okay, so now we can, right, we're not purchasing, we're not doing a rollover, and we're not, this is a rollover in a non-SBA deal. So we can delete these footnotes now. And as you see, right, things are already moving up as we go. So now let's fill in some more yellow. So buyer name, we'll just say that it's BW Capital LLC. And we'll say that Bill and I set up an investment company named after our law firm. That company, to my knowledge, does not exist, but it serves the purpose of this exercise. And misname, because this is the seller. here is the company name. So we don't know the company name, but so I'll just say, Fiberglass Co. Right. But you would just type in the name. Okay, now we get to the purchase price. They are asking 3.8. Somebody probably has offered a little bit less than that, but who knows? But for purposes of this, I'm going to offer 3.5. Right, a little bit of a discount because I'm doing an equity purchase. And we're going to stick to a standard kind of SBA structure, which would be, let's change it up. Let's do more aggressive. So we'll say 80% cash at close. And then we get down to a seller note. So there's a seller note has this massive number of things. All right, so we want to include interest, we want to include a term, we want to include subordination. If you're doing SBA, it's always going to be subordinated. Whether the note's on standby, any forgiveness, and we want to state that it's going to be set off, subject to set off. So here's a paragraph that we can insert that has all of this, and then we will pare this back. So copy that into here. We fix it so that the formatting, hit Control J to justify the formatting. Okay, so there's 700,000 left for the purchase price. So this is 20%. And we'll say the interest rate is 10%. Sort of a range of normal on those. We'll have standby for 2 years. This, after which it will be amortized over 8 years, so a total of 10. It'll be, then I'm going to add here, I'm going to add a balloon payment. What is a balloon payment? Of all outstanding interest and principal after year 5. After 5 years. And what that is just sort of affects the payment structure. And this was a more common note structure maybe a couple of years ago, but it still works. You'll always keep these at the subordination and the set off. But since I'm being a little more aggressive, having a little bit more of the note, a little bit more in the seller note as opposed to cash at close, I'm not going to do any forgivability. And we're not going to make it contingent. So that would be deleting that. So now, okay, or if we're planning to purchase real estate from the seller, no, we're not, so we can delete that. And there's no earn out because we're using SBA financing. So we delete that one. Okay, now we come down to this. So the purchase price is based on, we'll say, this listing is using SD and EBITDA is the same thing, which that's not accurate from an accounting standpoint, but whatever. We have to take numbers as given, so I'll just use EBITDA. And EBITDA in 2025. And then that equates to 3.5x That's my offer. I'll delete that. And we will move on. Okay, now we get to a whole bunch of footnotes. And, I'm deleting things as I go, so the numbers are changing. But if you didn't delete them originally, then the numbers would be the same. You can choose how you do it as you go through the template. But here, there's really nothing about inventory. There's a little bit, right? So we're a little bit of inventory, a little bit of FF&E. But we don't know how work in progress is being handled. We don't know about accounts receivable. So I don't want to commit to a number for working capital. Right? So I'm going to leave this default. And then all these footnotes are about things you can, potential permutations around working capital. But given how little I know, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to say purchase price assumes normalized level, and we would leave that up to diligence. Okay. So here in section 6, we have, these are closing conditions. We're going to be leasing real estate here. So we can go ahead and add this. We don't know about any key employees, so that's another thing that can go here. And justify the font so it's consistent. And then we will delete this footnote. And as you can see, as we delete footnotes, right, it looks more like what you would expect an LOI to look like in terms of a document. Okay, next is transition services. So here, it doesn't really say what they're offering. That's fine. A lot of times it doesn't. But let's say we were a little bit stingy with the offer and the structure. So let's say we're going to do we're going to do a consulting agreement. We're just going to pay the seller for all the time. We're not going to ask for any transition services included. We're just going to pay. So since it's an equity purchase, the seller is the individual. Seller will enter into a consulting agreement with buyer. For a period of up to 12 months. Pursuant to which buyer will pay seller, just going to use a nice round number, $50 per hour for transition services. Now, that's one way to do it. Not the only way to do it. Often a certain amount of transition services are included in the purchase price. And doesn't have to be. And it can be a hybrid of included and through a purchase agreement, or through a consulting agreement, sorry. We'll implement the default here of 90 days, recognizing that this is one of the things that tends to get pushed back on quite a bit. That's actually what this footnote is about. This isn't an edit, this is just a note. So we put in some auto extension language, and seller will probably delete that, but you can use that as an opportunity to lay out a realistic timeline, because if a seller thinks that you're going to be able to close and you're using SBA financing, and they think you're going to close in 30 days, then that's not going to happen. So you want realistic expectations. Otherwise, it can be a problem. So here, this note, we've got to pick a state. This business is in North Carolina. It's also where I happen to be. So this would always be, you would always choose North Carolina or this. Now, copy and paste this because that's a little bit quicker than typing it all out. I don't have an NDA in place. Right? I'm not, it's just a public listing. But let's say that I did. Let's say I signed an NDA November 14th, 2025. Right? That's, if there is a date, then I would write it there. If there's not a date, then there is, if you haven't signed an NDA, we do have language to input here, but we'll just assume that I did. Okay. Now we will 5 p.m. and we'll give them a week, just sort of a normal thing. They'll realize that experienced brokers will know that that's not an exploding deadline, so they won't treat it as such. And then, let's see, what did I call the buyer here? I made up an entity, so BW Capital LLC is our buyer. Copy and paste that down here. And now we put my name. And since it is an entity, this is a note about an entity, but since we have an entity, we'll keep the title line. And this is just a note to actually sign the LOI before you send it. Because if you don't sign it, it just looks weird. And then this is Miss Seller. Because here the seller is the individual, and so we could actually do away with that, although it doesn't really matter. And then we come back up here and make sure we delete the cover page. And there you go. So now we've gone from the document to just short of it's 3 pages and a little bit more with a signature page. And this is what it looks like when it's finalized. And let's really make that the same font because I am past the level of whatever. I'm obsessive about things like that, so be it. And we would, now be ready, right? Once we sign this, we'd be ready to fire it off and see what happens.